The final item of business today is a members' business debate on motion 58 in the name of Jim Fairlie on the impact of Scottish agriculture of tariff-free trade deals. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put, and I would ask those members who wish to speak in the debate to please press the request to speak buttons now, and I would call on Jim Fairlie to open the debate.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I officially welcome you to your new role? Finally get the chance to do it. Last week I met up with the National Farmers Union of Scotland at their invitation to discuss their concerns over the proposal for a tariff and quota-free deal currently under negotiation between the UK and Australian governments. Their briefing paper contained the following, and I quote, "NFU Scotland endorses the commitment that UK farmers should not be undercut by unfair competition and believes that trade deals that include the complete elimination of tariffs across agricultural sectors would seriously impact the farming and the rural communities that it supports." Excuse me. As the UK enters into negotiations for new trade deals with our trading partners around the world, it is important that sensitive sectors are considered. The cumulative impact of complete market liberalisation in future trade deals could be devastating to rural economies that are reliant on the industry and the jobs it brings. Once the precedent has been set, it will prove difficult to avoid in future trade deals. I have subsequently spoken with representatives of other various trade industry bodies, including the Scottish Tenant Farmers Association, the Institute of Auctioneers, the Scottish Association of Meat Wholesalers, Scottish Crofters Federation, the Scottish Butchers Federation, the Scottish Beef Association, Scottish Blackface Sheep Breeders Association and the National Sheep Association of Scotland, as well as numerous farmers in my constituency and across the country. Their excitement at the opportunities of this and future deals to be negotiated are palpable, said absolutely no one who understands or cares about this sector. In the very late 1800s and early 1900s, farming in this country was almost decimated as America opened up and transport became quicker, easier and cheaper. Grain and meat prices collapsed as the UK government opted for the liberalisation of markets. And as these prices collapsed, many tenants simply packed their carts and headed for the towns to try and find work. But the government insisted that cheap food was the priority, so land abandonment, land degradation and rural depopulation was commonplace. The farming sector didn't recover until during and after the Second World War, when the government realised that the German U-boat attacks on merchant ships were going to starve Britain into submission. The infrastructure that was needed for an entire industry had simply been decimated by years of inactivity and loss of skill set, which meant that the country had to reinvent its agricultural ability in order to feed itself. Thankfully, the farmers and the land girls faced up to that challenge and did exactly that. There has been a support system in place ever since, and the technological advances have been revolutionary, which has seen agriculture in Scotland resume its place in Scotland as the engine room for Scotland's rural economy and the bedrock for our fastest growing sector, the food and drink sector. So despite the protestations of Liz Truss and the Herald, the very survival of the industry is now being jeopardised by the trade deal being proposed with Australia in exactly the same way as the American and Canadian liberalisation deals did almost 100 years ago. The spuriousness of her arguments that we in the SNP are holding the industry back are laughable. We hear about the benefits... Finlay, go ahead.
Finlay Carson.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the member taking the intervention. Could you maybe give us an indication of when his SNP government are going to come forward with an outline on the plans for future rural support?
Jim Fairlie.
The SNP government are coming forward with a plan for future rural support after they have taken all the information and all the reports that they're going to get from the 5 working groups that have been set up to help tackle our climate emergency. So the spuriousness of her arguments that we in the SNP are holding back the industry are laughable, and I'll repeat that point, because we hear the benefits to the whisky industry and how that will help. But how many family farms will benefit from a 5% reduction in tariffs on whisky to Australia? I'd hazard there'll be very, very few, if any. So it's clear that the Tories are now going to try and make this out to be an SNP grievance-mongering, anti-Westminster rhetoric debate. In reality, it's not just the SNP that I'd like. It's not just the SNP, and I'd like to thank those Labour and Green members who have signed this motion. Nor is the concern limited to the trade bodies I've already mentioned. I've also been contacted by the World Wildlife Fund, who are gravely worried about the implications of this deal and the UK Government's determination to offshore its own environmental obligations. And I quote, "In a crucial year for climate and nature, a substandard deal with Australia would make a mockery of the UK Government's world-leading plans to support sustainable farming and green global supply chains." I could go on. Their report is really damning. Last week in this chamber, Kate Forbes challenged Murdo Fraser on the devastation that this and future trade deals would have on the sector. His response spoke volumes, because he cited South Ayrshire Council requiring public procurement bodies to reduce meat consumption by 75%. Now, if that's the best you've got, I'm afraid you really don't understand what's going on with the industry. But to pick up his point, the real threat is that if this deal goes through, and it is followed on by all the other shoddily prepared deals, we should be looking at recommending no meat products go into the menu for our children that have been imported from any of the hormone-injecting intensive feedlot system countries that Westminster are currently falling over themselves to do deals with. And let me just point this out to you. The total value of sales in the public procurement sector is worth £150 million. Now, that's a substantial amount of money, and I get that. And it's one that I will be working with the Scottish Government on to improve even further. Please do, Stephen.
Stephen Kerr.
Thank you. The problem that the SNP have is you're fundamentally a party that is opposed to free trade. Tell me one example of the SNP voting for a free trade deal with anybody in any parliament. Give me one example.
Jim Fairlie, and I'll give you a wee bit extra time for the two interventions you've taken.
Thank you. The EU. So, and let me just point this out. And let me just point this out to you, Mr. Kerr. You had your moment. Please just let me point this out. The total value of sales into the public, the total
Excuse me, could we have less chat across the chamber, please?
Sorry, I couldn't hear myself for the
I appreciate Mr. Fairlie, just carry on. Yeah.
The total value of sales in the public procurement sector, and I'm referring back to Mr. Murdo Fraser's response last week, is £150 million. Now, that is a substantial amount of money, and that is one that I will be working with the Scottish Government to see how much better we can do to improve that and to see how much more we can get into the public sector. I absolutely take that on board. But that figure is completely dwarfed by our total grocery sale figure of £12 billion in annual spend in Scotland. So there is no way that the public procurement sales are going to solve the pain of destroying our own domestic market with foreign imports now that they have destroyed the relationship with the biggest single market in the world. And let's take that a step further. If Liz Truss wants to talk about the great trading opportunity we're being given as a result of their Brexit, our pre-Scottish Brexit red meat sales to the EU in 2019 were worth £87 million. Our red meat sales to Australia in the same year were £142,000. So in other words, we'd need to do over 600 Australia-sized deals just to match what we previously had. And to describe this as a major opportunity is utterly laughable. So I know that Scotland's farming community can thrive and meet its climate change targets with the kind of support that the SNP government is offering. I know that Ambition 2030 is not only hugely ambitious, it's an achievable ambition because of the fantastic cooperative nature that has been built in the sector since 2007, when Richard Lochhead introduced Scotland's first national food policy for Scotland, first one in Europe. And I know that our hospitality sector has got a fantastic future if we continue to build on the reputation we have taken decades to build. And I know that we continue to improve the health of our nation and our children by ensuring that they are fed the very best that we can grow and deliver. And let me point out right now, 90% of red meat is currently served in schools is Scotch.
Mr. Fairlie, could you please bring your remarks to a close?
Yep, I'll bring them to a close. But I also know that all of this can be destroyed at the stroke of Boris Johnson's pen, signing trade deals that will take us back to the early 1900s. This Parliament and everyone in this chamber, including yourself, Mr. Kerr, should make sure that we do everything in our power that he doesn't get the opportunity to destroy what we have worked so hard to build. Thank you.